This is Money Mind on CNA938. I'm Stanley Leong with Chu Wei Lin. Thank you for joining us. Now, before the pandemic, the meetings, incentives, conferences, and exhibitions or MICE sector had provided jobs to some 26 million people around the world and contributed $1.5 trillion in global GDP. Now, this means it was the 13th biggest contributor to the global economy at the time. Now, since the pandemic, global exhibitions sector has contracted by almost 70%.
Well, UFI, the Global Association of the Exhibition Industry, did a survey among 450 respondents in the events sector at the start of this year. More than half said they'd had to reduce their workforces. 1/3 saw a drop in profits of more than 50%, and 1 in 10 said that they would have to close down if there was no business for the next 6 months. But because we have one of the highest vaccination rates in the world, Singapore is now taking cautious steps towards reopening. Is this cause for cheer among those in the events industry? And how can the industry adapt to the new normal moving forward? Well, joining us to discuss this is Veemal Gungadin, who is CEO of Singapore-based event technology provider Gevme. We're also joined by Jessica Cheam, founder and managing director of Eco Business. It's an independent media and business intelligence company dedicated to sustainable development and ESG performance. Now, thank you both for joining us today. Let's start with Veemal. How optimistic are you about the road ahead for those in the events industry, especially here in Singapore?
Well, thanks. Thanks for having me. So look, I believe that the events industry right now, we're pretty much reaching a tipping point. There is great potential to innovate beyond the previous form and demonstrate digital excellence that is probably far more superior than what was happening pre-pandemic. As you know, in Singapore, we have officially eased measures around travel and the running of events. It's now possible to organize events up to 1,000 participants if certain conditions are met. And with Singapore's focus on gaining expertise in managing human flows and implementing safe management measures, along with the emergence of new innovative tech solutions, I think the road ahead for the events industry actually looks bright. However, there are some things that we actually learned from running events during the pandemic that we should actually take with us for the future. So, for example, we're seeing like corporate companies are now seeing value in conducting virtual events for certain types of events. And we see the events industry gearing more now towards what we call a hybrid future. Now, these new forms of events, right, have the added benefits of being, more importantly, more sustainable. And recently there was a very recent research from the Meetings show. And that was great to see that 73% of event professionals still believe that sustainability will return to the top of the agenda post-COVID. Right? So looking at this and looking at the current trend and trajectory and the lineup of events that we're already having here, I think we can expect a progressive revival of the events industry and a movement towards hopefully a more sustainable era in this industry.
Right, and that continuity that we saw in the events space continued because we could rely on technology during this season of a pandemic. Now, tell us how events businesses have harnessed technology during these times to ensure that it's business as usual, well, as close to as usual as possible, even before the pandemic hit.
So look, lots of companies have obviously suffered a lot. The economy has suffered, the MICE industry has suffered, but at the same time what has happened is there have been lots of digital transformation, forced digital transformation that has happened. And I would say in Singapore, there are many event agencies, many venues as well, that have actually transformed. And I would say they're on the path of becoming very much of tech companies. And for those who have embraced these changes and embarked on this journey, right? So today they're harnessing technology to provide a more immersive and seamless event experience. And then I mentioned about like these new events being very much hybrid. And then these events have, more importantly, the potential of higher ROI. Right? So virtual events today, what we're seeing, those organized very much in Singapore, most of them are no more just simple, boring Zoom calls. In fact, we're seeing virtual events, hybrid events, being delivered with almost TV production quality, right? And these virtual and I would say now hybrid events offer unique benefits. They're flexible, scalable, attendees can come from all over the world, and there's pretty much no limit in terms of customization. And more importantly, it's the ability to collect crucial data. And data was such a pain before. Like, for example, just the simple thing of measuring how engaged an audience was listening to a certain speaker, that was difficult to track in the past. But now, it's pretty easy, like with digital tools, with technology, and businesses are already leveraging on that. They're leveraging on that to get better insights around the engagement level of their attendees with the relevant topics. And corporate companies are then using this information to improve their marketing strategies. Exhibitors and sponsors, who are such an important part of events, are now getting richer information around leads that they collect during any events. So you see, like all of these powered by technology, I think can effectively drive and improve ROI, and that's what we're really seeing.
All right, let's get the perspective of Jessica, who has actually held several events amid the pandemic using Veemal's platform Gevme. Jessica, your company EcoBusiness, I understand you held an event in July called the Livability Challenge, and that was a competition in which startups from around the world could pitch their solutions to urban challenges which are facing cities in the tropics. So tell us more about how this event, the Livability Challenge, was held then, and how did it compare with how this event was held in previous years?
Yes, thank you so much for having me. So the Livability Challenge is organized by EcoBusiness and presented by Temasek Foundation. And in the past, we used to fly in judges and fly in the startups to Singapore and host a big event of like 200 to 300 people in the Marina Bay Sands. And because of the pandemic, of course, we can't do this anymore, but we really had to evolve with the times. And using the Gevme platform was so useful because we actually orchestrated this massive event in the end at MBS still, but with 50 people in person and with a global audience, as well as judges, dialing in from the World Economic Forum in Geneva, startups dialing in from the US, from UK, and also some in Singapore that managed to make it to the event. And our event happened just as the KTV cluster outbreak happened, and we had to really respond very quickly to reconfigure our event. And we had to speak with masks on and everything. But as Veemal mentioned earlier, we really learned how to do a TV production quality events with this hybrid setup, because then you can actually give your virtual attendees a much better experience. You lower the carbon footprint, and you also enable a global reach.
So would you say there are benefits to holding virtual or hybrid events compared to live events, Jessica?
Yes, well, I have to say, as a sustainability advocate, the carbon footprint of, a physical event is much higher. And we actually have a initiative where we offset our carbon footprint every single year to be carbon neutral. And so that lowering of the footprint has been appreciated. I do have to say, though, that I think going forward, there will still be a need for in-person events. There's no replacement for human interaction. And therefore, I think hybrid events are the way forward. We're hosting an event with the UN on the 16th of September at St. Regis Hotel. And it's going to be, again, a hybrid event where we have 50 people in the room, and we are using Gevme's platform to then dial in another 500 more who are able to experience the event like they're watching a TV production with, panel speakers on the stage, virtual speakers being dialed in. And I think this is really kind of like the new normal as we see it.
All right. And how do you deal with the issue of, people networking and things like that? Is that possible with virtual or hybrid events?
That is a very good question. So we've experimented with a whole different things. We have actually what we call virtual networking groups. So after the whole event, we actually invite people and we send them into virtual breakout groups, and we have each one of our team members moderate a discussion where it's a lot more relaxed and they exchange contacts and exchange ideas. And then the in-person events are a little bit tougher because there are many COVID regulations, but they're still manageable. So with the latest rules, we can have 5 at the table, having a coffee and talking about things. And I think going forward, we're going to have to see this. So the event that I mentioned on 16th of September, at the end of the event, after a whole day proceedings, we have both in-person drinks and then a virtual networking for our 500 people online. So I think there's going to be this hybrid experience across all the events that we see coming ahead.
This is Money Mind on CNA938. We're discussing how the events industry has been coping amid the pandemic. We just heard a while ago from Jessica Cheam, who is founder and managing director of Eco Business. They are an independent media and business intelligence company dedicated to sustainable development and ESG performance. And also with us is Veemal Gungadin, who is CEO of Singapore-based event technology provider Gevme. Now, Veemal, back to you. We've been living with the pandemic for more than a year now, more than 1.5 years. What lessons have you learned as an event technology provider?
I think it's not just us as an event provider, but what I've seen within the whole ecosystem, within the whole events industry, is people bonded, right? So we all collaborated, and to me that was probably the biggest lesson. So we had different companies coming together, like event companies, event agencies who used to be competitors. Sitting down, thinking of reimagining the future. We have been collaborating with other tech companies ourselves, right? Because there's a whole slew of challenges that's facing us. Like, how do we bring back people in a very safe way to start with, right? So how do you measure that things are being compliant? So rather than building all of these ourselves, so we collaborated with other companies. And that has been pretty good to see. With regards to content, like for example, we saw ourselves being in a position where at a certain point in time, so we had to guide our customers. We had to guide our stakeholders with regards to what the future would be. So we created educational material. We partnered with content providers. So one of which is Web in Travel. So we partnered with them to create a show that we call the Virtual Experience Makers, where we bring in different people from different areas like DJs, chefs, circus, people running circus, but where they had to transform during the pandemic and then deliver more of virtual experiences or hybrid experiences, and then bringing these as inspiration for other people to basically probably see. And then this in a way, like for example, because we do believe there's certain types of events that will continue to be virtual, right? You mentioned about networking earlier. I think today this is probably still an unsolved problem. But some people go for events, for conferences, just for the educational part. For these type of audience, for these type of events, virtual is just so much convenient, right? But some events you just want to meet with people, and those will continue to be like in person or maybe hybrid, right? So yeah, so collaboration, that has been the biggest lesson for us, and we're doing that more and more, and which is why we are pretty happy with the collaboration we're having with Eco Business as well. So more on top of Eco Business using our platform, we are really looking forward like to uncover the impacts on sustainability in the new formats of events.
All right. What about you, Jessica? It must have been a very steep learning curve for you as you tried to hold events during the pandemic. Any tips for people who want to hold virtual or hybrid events? What have you learned? What works and what doesn't work?
First thing is a stable and strong internet connection. I remember that when we hosted the Livability Challenge last year during the pandemic, and it was full-on circuit breaker, we had a venue where the internet connection was not as stable as we needed. And 5 minutes before our event started, it kicked everybody out of Zoom. And then we had to scramble and restart it, and everything crashed. And oh my gosh, I think my stress level was so high. But thankfully, everybody came online. We managed to Facebook live stream it still, and we got like 2,000 people watching in the end. But I have to say, like, don't underestimate the power of stable internet. And you really need to invest in it. And then I guess the other dimension of that really is thinking about how do we lower the footprint of our digital activities. And that's something that, I would be speaking to Veemal as well. And I think it's very interesting how events have evolved and the kind of new skills that you've had to learn. Yeah.
I think in the earlier days, I think people were more generally forgiving, but now we're so far into the pandemic, almost you're not able to get the kind of graciousness, I suppose. So expectations have definitely gone up. Veemal, what new developments can we expect in the events space, and how will future events be held, do you think?
Look, I think the future is hybrid. Right, so hybrid meaning say there's your live physical audience, and then pretty much almost always your digital audience joining in. So I think that's going to be the norm. So venues, like for example, if I look at it in a Singapore context, almost all venues that I'm aware of, and now hotels as well, already equipping themselves, right? So rather than putting, like for example, the burden of internet on the organizers or on the show owners, venues are taking that up now and then positioning themselves as a great place to provide hybrid capabilities. So I think that's definitely one of it. The next thing is personalization of experiences. So one of the big change that is happening now is, number one is, and again we probably mentioned that just now, so platforms are getting stabler, right? So maybe last year when everything was still new, so we had that tolerance for errors, and then many organizers found themselves in a place where they had to piece together different pieces of technology, and then if one breaks, then it's like, oh my gosh, it's very difficult to solve that. But now we're seeing like better technology coming up, and then all-in-one inclusive that supports organizers right from the registration all the way to checking in people on site to doing the virtual experience, and to have, like for example, these days when you do a polling, a Q&A, so that should be not just reserved to people with microphone in the room, but it should be people with microphone in the room or using their mobile device to ask questions, but as well as your online audience joining in, right? So, and that's the bridging of the physical and then the digital audience. And I think very soon we're going to be seeing that becoming the norm. So
right. Well,
for the future.
Well, Jessica, you've just heard Veemal say that hybrid is the future. How do you feel about that? Will you miss live events?
No, absolutely. I think hybrid is the future, but there is still a role for live events. Like I mentioned, I think we can't really replace human interaction, and I think that people will still have live events. But the expectation now is that you will have a hybrid, so you can also involve virtual participants. I always joke that the most often used phrase for virtual events these days are "you're on mute," because everybody forgets, and it's disruptive to conversations. But it's also quite funny, how organizers, I suppose, have had to evolve to also understand what are the technical abilities, the innovations out there, to be able to kind of dial in virtual speakers and in-person speakers. And it's been such a huge learning experience for all of us. So I would say I definitely look forward to the return of live events, but the experience of events as we know it has changed for the better.
Well, good to hear that, and glad to hear that you've both been coping very well during the pandemic. Thank you very much for telling us how the events industry has been dealing with the fallout from the pandemic. We've just heard from Jessica Cheam, founder and managing director of Eco Business. We also heard from Veemal Gungadin, who is CEO of Singapore-based event technology provider Gevme.